And Britain's Prime Minister says his country will not make an additional €1.7 billion payment that the European Union has demanded to support its budget for this year. Cameron has described the EU's demand for extra funds as completely unacceptable and voiced anger over what he says is the appalling way that Britain is being treated by the European Commission.
This is completely unacceptable. It is an unacceptable way for this organisation to work, to suddenly present a bill like this for such a vast sum of money with so little time to pay it, and it's an unacceptable way to treat one of the biggest contributors to the European Union. It has never been the case that a €2 billion bill has suddenly been presented, and it is not acceptable. It is an appalling way to behave. I'm not paying that bill on the 1st of December. If people think I are, they got another thing coming. It is not going to happen.
Well, Cameron made those comments at a news conference in Brussels. He was speaking after the bloc presented Britain with a demand for an extra payment after a revision of economic statistics showed the UK was better off. Cameron says this does not help the chances of his country remaining in the EU, especially at a time when pressure is rising at home for the country to leave the bloc. And to discuss that further, we're now joined by Professor Keith Pilbeam, who is a professor of international economics and finance at the City University, and he's joining us now on the line from London. Professor, thanks very much for joining us here on Press TV. I'm kind of a bit confused about where to stand exactly on this issue. It does seem that the EU is being unfair, at least on paper, and certainly the UK has not been the nicest player when it comes to the EU as well. So where do you stand on this?
Well, unfortunately, it's not exactly the case. I mean, the UK knows the rules and has agreed to the rules. And actually, it should come as no surprise that we're getting this surcharge. So they've known about it for weeks.
But then certainly, Professor, I would imagine that David Cameron can use this to his political advantage in the sense that he can gain a lot of support from those in the UK who are anti-EU.
Well, obviously, it does help the people that are against EU membership for the UK. It sort of gives them something to talk about. But 1.7 billion is a very small percentage of the UK economy. It's like 0.01% of our economy. So the idea we want to leave the EU and risk all the damage to the economy, just over 0.01% of our GDP, is rather stupid.
Right, and Professor, I'm wondering, have relations between the EU and the UK essentially been irreversibly fractured at this time? Because, it's been such a while that these anti-EU sentiments have been even expressed by the Prime Minister himself.
Well, obviously, he's got to be careful. It's one thing to say he won't pay on the 1st of December, but eventually he's got to pay. Otherwise, Britain will be subject to fines and so forth. So he's being a bit disingenuous. It's arrived at an inconvenient time for him, but actually, this was well known about. And so, to suddenly make a storm over it is rather stupid.
And finally, Professor, I'm wondering, because you are an expert in economics and finance, do you think that on paper, at least when it comes to the economy, that it would be smart for the UK to remain within the EU?
If we leave the EU, it will be devastating for the UK. It will cost tens of billions of pounds in the long run and hit our economic growth rate, hit foreign direct investment flows into the UK, devastate the job market. It would be completely foolish. This 1.7 billion would seem like peanuts.
Okay, we'll leave it there at that. But of course, Professor, we do sincerely appreciate your opinions. That was Professor Keith Pilbeam, who was speaking to us live on the line from the British capital.